I'm in the zone to be. From a yin to my yang to my yang to see. Put a grin on my chin when you come to me. Cause I'm weird, I'm a one of a kind, and I'll bring death to the place you're about to be. Another river of blood running under my feet. Forged in a fire lit long ago. Stand next to me, you'll never stand alone. I'm last to leave, but the first to go. Lord, make me dead before you make me old. I feed on the fear of the devil inside of the enemy faces in my sight. Aim with a hand, shoot with a mind, kill with a heart like Arctic ice.
I am a soldier and I'm marching on.
I am a soldier and I'm marching on.
I am a warrior, this is my song.
I am a warrior and this is my song. I'm bask in the glow of the rising war. Lay waste to the ground of an enemy shore.
I read you Lima Charlie, loud and clear.
All right, everyone, welcome back. We are on part 2. This is the first time we've ever done a 2-part Lima Charlie episode. Most people, we can get by in 30 minutes or an hour, but Rusty's done a few things. So we done a lot. In fact, Rusty, I was hearing from, for those who didn't know or didn't see part 1, let me put it up here real quick. I'm going to post here at the bottom, part 1 of our interview with Rusty from last week. So it was last Tuesday. What day was that? Oh no, September 30th, the last day of September. So I heard some people from the people this week, Rusty, that were like, was there any school he didn't go to? So there's bets on, did you make it to Armor's course or IG school or EO school? Like you made everything. Is there anything you didn't get to?
Pathfinder and Halo.
Halo. Air assault? Did you do air assault?
Oh yeah, that was the first one I ever went to.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
You went jump master?
Yep.
You go jump masters? Just didn't get to Halo and Pathfinder, huh? Yeah, 2 very coveted.
No, I was actually usually if group thinks they're going to use you for a specialty team, and I think we discussed, I squirreled my way into Navy Dive and Salvage School, and then the instructors let us do a week of Draeger training, and like all the other stuff on clearing hull searches on ships and nuclear submarines and planting devices. So I got my combat diver certification from the complexity of the course and all the additional stuff that they gave us that wasn't required afterwards.
Oh, so you just kind of got it through, just was able to do extra stuff enough to qualify for the combat diver. Now, when you wore your diving badge on uniform, did you wear like a Navy badge or was it the Army diving badge?
That was an Army dive badge, or the Army combat diver badge, because everything that we did was the exact same requirements, and that was what made it really interesting, was getting the opportunity to go through additional training that wasn't part of the course. So I got my Draeger training from instructors and actual members of SEAL Team 1, because the Navy dive school that I went to was on Ford Island. Right. And that's right across from where one of the headquarters is. And of course, it's Special Operations Command Pacific's located there. So they were like, hey, you're interested in learning how to breathe without bubbles? And I'm like, well, yeah, of course.
Yeah. It's funny, last week we talked in part 1 and you talked about, I don't remember exactly, I'm paraphrasing, but being there where the attack on Pearl Harbor happened and seeing like buildings that still had the bullet holes and the scars and marks in them. It made me think of Ford Island. The last time, I've been to Hawaii many times, but the last time we were there, there's the infamous tower. I think it was a tower that was strafed on Ford Island, like red and white tower or something like that. And there's a building right next to it. I'm sure like it was the barracks or command post there, and it's not occupied anymore. But, my kids and I, we'd watched probably Pearl Harbor, watched something right before we went out there the last time. And we walked up, and you can see same thing. See those bullet holes where those Japanese Zeros strafed that tower, and where the building was strafed, and it's just crazy to see like that piece of history still, still preserved, and just still like they didn't patch it up, they didn't, fix it up and all that stuff. They left those marks there, and that is it made me think of that when you were talking about that last week.
So the actual, we're I don't know if it's still there. The Navy Dive and Salvage School that we went to uh, was where the PBR boat planes were at on December 7th. And we went out every day as a reminder of how you have to be prepared. Exact same thing. There are, I guess, 20 millimeter Japanese Zero impact marks. There's probably 60 or 80 of them, like in this linear row leading up to the dive school. And that was where the boat planes were all parked at on December 7th. So everywhere you went was some kind of reminder of the seriousness and the severity of what you were supposed to be training to be prepared for.
Yeah. Yes. And something that until 2001, we had pretty much never seen again an attack on our homeland, and until those days happened, but it was something that definitely left a mark on us, right? We like to take the fight to everyone else. We don't want it coming to our citizens, but so we talked a lot last time. We spent just a touch over an hour last week talking about pretty much leading up to that. You came from being enlisted, went to Special Forces and Q course and all the schools and everything like that. And the reason why we want to break into two parts for those that are tuning in and watching was because we just didn't want it to be a 2 or 3 hour show. We wanted to try to, and there's so much content. So Rusty, I'm excited to jump right into it and talk. And you have, I remember, a total of, I don't know, total tours, but 7 tours in Afghanistan. Was that correct? Or 8?
Well, eight tours in Afghanistan alone, and then that's not counting all the other countries that we went into and operated in for short periods of time. It's every organization does it differently. We used to didn't really consider a tour anything, or a deployment, excuse me, a tour, combat tour, anything less than 90 days. So if you were there for 87 days, we didn't consider it a combat tour. But then we started learning a lot of the other JSOC units, they only deploy for 90 days or 92 days. So I would say probably about 17 total.
Wow. And those were
about 8 in Afghanistan.
Were those countries that were they combat operations, or were those countries where you're doing FID operations, working with indigenous forces and training them out? Or were they an actual gunslinging?
No, they were combat operations.
So about 17 combat tours of varying lengths. But yes, like you said, special operations typically don't, regular forces may do a year, but whether it be special forces, some of the operations, they range from 3 months to 7 months, something to that degree, typically, right? So now, when you we're going to get back to those. I want to kind of set the stage for Afghanistan. One thing unique about special forces, and different than conventional forces, is guys in Marines and Army go in and out all the time. They went for a year, came back for a year and a half, went back for a year. Could end up anywhere, but you kept going to the same area of operations, right? You stayed focused, and that's something kind of SF does, right? They zero in on, even if they leave for a while, they come back to relationships, hopefully, that they already had, and knowing the terrain. Was every one of your 8 tours all in the Kandahar area?
Yes, sir. Every single one of them were in Kandahar. And it's funny you said that, because I was the first cohort of 13 guys, 12 or 13 guys that were sent to learn Pashto. And it was 7.5 months of the craziest language training, because you're learning a tribal language. Back then we had no workbooks, no dictionaries, no like, we ended up having 3 different teachers.
I was going to ask, were the
And
teachers Afghans that came here, or were they actual college professors that taught that, or
no,
actual?
they were actual Afghans that had been brought in, 1 woman and 2 men. And we figured out about 4 months into the course, because we would lose one every couple of months because they would get a much higher paying job because of their language skills, um, and their teaching skills. So we would get one for 2, 3 months, and then they would leave, and then somebody else would come in. And then we figured out, well, one of them was from the north up in Kabul, so they pronounce their vowels and words differently, even though it's all still subject, object, verb. Um, then, we got somebody who was from Southwest Pakistan who was teaching. Their dialects and words pronunciation is completely different. And then we got another one, I think, that was from the Kandahar area, and again, same thing. So Kandahar, if you're saying the name Kandahar, it still means fortified city in Pashto, but they say Kandahar, Kandadar, Kandashar, and it's you just figure out really quick that it's so tribal and so dialectic that, man, my head was spinning my first deployment as a Green Beret, because you would travel 20 kilometers in any cardinal direction and try to have a conversation, and they would be like, ha ha ha.
You sound funny.
They knew what you were saying. They could figure it out, especially with my horrible Appalachian dialect. But,
It'd be like trying to
they
learn
used to call me
English.
Trevon Maleen, the captain teacher, because I sounded like a teacher. I would speak to Singa Ye, you how are? And they were like, oh, you sound like a teacher. And then when you go into the city, they use slang, Singa. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Or psycho. They would say that, right? Psycho. We had to hear that a lot. And
I said all that just because when we graduated the course, and it was extremely difficult, and there was no reading and writing, even though most of the alphabet was in Arabic. We did speaking, listening, and that was it. That was our DOPT test. And the commanding general for all of SWIC came in and told, or yes, special warfare came in and told us, and said, you guys will never, no matter how long this war lasts, as long as you're in the Army and Special Forces, you will never go anywhere else. That is now your regional expertise, and you will go back there and keep going back there. And your job is to immerse yourself in the politics, the culture, the language, the religion, the socioeconomic aspects. If there's law, Sharia law, like everything, you got to get to know everybody. You got to be able to be a sheriff, a politician, a trash man, a shopkeeper. Like, you got to figure it all out, because that's the only place you're going. And that's exactly what happened.
so was this a DLI course, or was it just run by SWIC? Or was it even?
The test was done by DLI, and even the instructors that were there, they had to give us 2 different tests when they found out that how much of our responses and speaking and listening, nobody passed the test the first time, because the instructor was somebody who was from, or excuse me, the examiner was somebody who was from Western Afghanistan in Herat.
In Herat, yeah.
And a lot of their words are Farsi.
Yep.
And a lot of the Afghan words are Dari and Urdu
Right.
and Pashto. So you'll hear maybe 3 words in a sentence and then how it's pronounced and try to put it together, and it takes you a second. Um, but once you would get into the village and you start, the thing that I figured out really quickly was when you're being respectful, they, because of Pashtunwali, which is the tribal laws and customs that govern the Pashtun people and how they believe that Allah is going to judge them or reward them or punish them when they get to paradise. Well, you learned Netawate, safe passage, Badal, revenge. Uh, when they see that you're trying to learn these things and apply them in their language, they became much more susceptible to la 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 la, no, 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 no. That's not how you say this.
Yeah, they saw you're making effort, and they tried
Yes,
to.
sir.
So did you need a terp when you were over there? Since you got totally immersed, did you still count on an interpreter at all, or did?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it wasn't. They were rapid fire, and you were still talking like a teacher, but you could pick up what was being said, or.
So a lot of the reason that I used interpreters, number one, because our interpreters were Afghans. So I wasn't spending half my time trying to figure out what was being said. I needed somebody who could converse. The other thing that I figured out after the first couple of combat operations where either you're dealing with the Taliban or you're dealing with locals, I didn't want them to know that I spoke.
I was going to ask about that. Did you ever stay quiet and see what they said, and you just sat back?
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what I was doing. I'm listening to what's being said around me because they're like, oh, you're from a half a world away and you're a big country Norwegian looking, bearded thing with all this crazy equipment on, or no equipment. I would go into a lot of the meetings with tribal leaders and stuff, just in either in civilian clothes, Afghan garb. But I want to hear what they're saying because then the interpreters, they don't always hear every conversation that's going on.
Oh, especially
And there was a couple of times that worked out extraordinarily well where they didn't think that anybody could possibly speak Pashto or understand it. And a lot of times you can balance it between one of the schools that they sent us to was called the Reed Institute, where you would learn to read body languages. You had to be able to do that not only for social settings and high stakes negotiations is another course that they sent us to, but you're dealing with people that what they say and the gestures they use and how they use them, like we would, if we tell somebody to come like this, that just means come here. But if they do this, that's a derogatory. If they want you to come, they'll turn their hand down, sort of thing. You never know when that one little nugget of something is either going to make your mission successful or save your life or save the life of somebody that you're working with.
Yeah. Yeah. And those shuras where you had a room full of, elders around, like you said, you had one interpreter and you may be actively talking through the interpreter to one person, but then these other guys over here are chatting. I'm assuming you were kind of really trying to tune into them and because the interpreter's going to tell you what he's saying, right? But you're tuning in to see are they being sarcastic? Are they talking about you? Are they like, yeah, that guy's saying whatever, we're going to do what we want? I mean, did your interpreters know that you spoke, that you understood?
A little bit because I practiced with them a lot.
Okay.
A lot of our dialogue when we were in the truck or back at the fire base was about them constantly teaching, coaching, mentoring me on this, this society and this civilization that's at the edge of the known world. And you have to set aside. There's a book they made us read in the Q course called The Ugly American. and it was basically that you probably heard of it or have read it, but you didn't want to be that guy.
Right.
And a lot of the euphemisms and mannerisms and the cursing and that sort of stuff you're not going to get anywhere. You can be a big barrel chested freedom fighter and be completely respectful, and respect costs you nothing to give, but it can cost you everything on a battlefield or when you're trying to convince people, like the guy that I taught to write his name. And then all of a sudden he just miraculously has 100 fighters that he's willing to clear roads from IEDs or put scouts out to give us direction if they think they've seen, Al Qaeda or Haqqani movement or Taliban movement. Those guys become invaluable because you're just being respectful.
Yeah, yeah. No, just want to kind of give our listeners and viewers a little perspective. When you were talking about the 3 different instructors from 3 different parts of Afghanistan, obviously being people that's never been there, just think, everyone speaks Afghan speaks, but I mean, to put it in perspective in the U.S., I would think it'd probably equate to something like having 3 instructors, one from Boston, one from Birmingham, Alabama, and one from Boulder, Colorado. That's pretty much what I imagine your instructors were like in trying to teach you Pashto, with no workbooks, no anything, just off speaking it and getting you to memorize it.
News guys, yuns, and y'all all mean the same thing, or you all in proper English, but how they say it and where they're from, they sound different to people who've never heard of,
Right, right. Yeah. And then you throw the slang in there, local Afghan slang from those areas, and yeah, just odds on top. So you got over there, 8 tours. How long were your tours typically?
Nevertheless, the shortest tour I did was, I think, 120 days. The longest tour I did was a year.
Okay, full year. And did you fall in and work with the same local leaders and all that kind of stuff? Were you seeing the same people, or did you come back and some got killed or gone? Or, I mean, did you have that rapport after tour with the same people that are on the ground?
Yes. Yes and no. So basically, both of those answers you just gave, there were usually about 6 or 8 predominant political and military leaders that you made friends with. These people are still human beings, and once you earn their trust, we stayed in touch with them when we got back to the States. We had emails where we would converse with them about life just to stay in touch with each other. But there were constantly, because of the IED, suicide bombings, assassinations, there was constantly a turnover in, the governors always changed because that's politics. The mayor usually stayed the same. The district police chiefs and the district governors typically would move around, or, because they didn't want to stay at Target for very long to be in the hot seat. And then a lot of the contentious areas like district governors and provincial governors in places like Helmand, Paktia, Jalalabad, like a lot of those guys stayed because they had enormous power and wealth, and they typically had the ability to dodge getting killed. Or, I mean, there are subsistence level people, and a lot of people don't understand, why don't they pick a side? Well, a lot of these extremely poor countries, very few people are nationalistic, like we would consider nationalistic or patriotic, because their concept of country doesn't exist. They are, if you look at a man's name, they have their name, their father's name, their family name, tribal name, and or village name. That's why they all have like 4 or 5 names.
Right.
But they're trying to survive, and the way that they survive is they ride the fence.
Yep.
They don't think about a retirement plan or a 401k. They think about feeding their family this week or surviving this week, this month. And that's about as far out as they look. So trying to take all of that in, I think is very difficult for guys, like I told you in the first segment. When I started studying sociology, all of this stuff came to fruition that I had studied in college that I thought, oh, yeah, how many times did you sit in your algebra, geometry, or trigonometry class and go, I'll never use this when I'm an adult?
Yep. Yeah. I said that a lot about algebra. I would never deal with positive or negative numbers. And then the Army made me 11 Charlie. And I was in FDC pretty quick. And I was a master of positive and negatives, but I never thought I'd see that graduating high school in Arkansas, let me tell you. But that's not what I expected. But so we did talk about, so when you went back over there, you stayed contact. Did you flip flop with the same teams? So when you weren't there, was it always the same team commander, all that were in there? So were you flip flopping just with one other team, or was it like 3 teams that rotated through the year in the same area?
That's a good question. I think there was about 4 or 5 years where a lot of the same teams really tried to go back to the same uh, areas of operation because the areas that are dangerous. Like it doesn't take you very long to figure out your area and the people that are in your area. And there were a few occasions, every group, when we would rotate out, another group would come in and they would do their 6 months. And you're never there for 6 months. You're there for 3 weeks prior and 3 weeks after your 6 months. So you're always really there 7.5 months. But I think when we were inherently very successful was when the battalion commanders would allow the teams to go back to their same fire bases and their same AORs because your learning curve is much shorter.
Right. Yeah. They can't pull anything over on you and say, oh, the last guys allowed us to do this and we did this. And you're like, no, I know exactly what you did. Now, remind me, I'm pretty sure Scott Mann and you know each other. I know we've talked in the past. You guys changed in the same territory. I think Scott was in the same area you were, right?
So Scott was a few years, I think he was 2 years, 3 years, 2 years ahead of me. So true story. First of all, let me caveat this by saying Scott Mann is an absolute genius at unconventional warfare, coin, and fit. Like, if we ever go to war with anybody and that dude shows up, you better surrender. Just freaking give it up. I worked for Scott. So when they started the Village Stability Operations Program, Scott was my first commander. So 2 of us, a guy named Jim Gant and myself, got BNR by name requested from SOCOM or the SecDef because we knew the language, we'd been there so many times, and we could go out into these districts and live among the people alone and unafraid and still accomplish the mission sets that we'd been given. So I actually got to work for Scott on the very first deployment and rotation that they were implementing VSO, and he was the South VSO director out of Kandahar. So even when I left the teams and doing actual team stuff, when I got put into Village Stability Operations, when they kicked that off, they sent me over, and the first person that I worked for and met was Colonel Scott Mann.
Yes, a hell of a man, patriot, and continued giving back, and continues today with all his work he does. And Yeah, I think we saw when Kabul fell how he was still can be very effective even from around the other side of the world that he did with Pineapple Express. But
So I guess I don't know, a long time ago, they used to have that, like everybody, there was a game or a joke or something, like everybody was 7 steps from Kevin Bacon.
right,
So literally, I was in the UAE working as the counterinsurgency advisor, got a text message, hey, some guys have put together this thing, and was like, if you know of anybody and their families that need to get out that can move, will take instruction and do it now, send us their names and their contacts. And I sent them like 4 of the only ones that I knew and had contacted, other than my interpreter and his family. And I got them out in 2017.
yeah,
But,
was I was
and then come to find out, Scott was the one pulling all the strings, making it
yeah.
happen.
Yep, we I spent a number of days there when I should have been working on Signal and just and talking to him and talking to folks and a lot of my own interpreters trying to help me get their families out and people I worked with that had interpreters that were trying to, it was that was just a blur of a time. And the stuff he did was, him and other groups were doing phenomenal. Him and Save Our Allies and all them was, you just don't realize how many people you know, how many connections you have till something like that happens. And then it's amazing when you start to highlight your own network and realize what happens. But hey, so let's talk about a little bit about, so when you think back to, of course, multiple deployments, many years of it, you probably have many that follow this, but you know, part of this whole show is just, you know, these stories from downrange that people just would never hear, you know, whether they're gun firefights or this, it doesn't matter, but you know, just people, incidents, things that left a mark on you, things that you would never forget that left a positive or negative impression on you from those tours. Anything comes to mind? It kind of just, if you were to rank a top couple of them that just really stick with you and probably will to your last dying day. I know there's a lot because you knew this question was coming.
You know, I'll be honest with you. I never. This is so. There probably are some stories. I'm not sure that, like, some of them are, you know, stuff that I don't want to
Right.
discuss. Those are the ones that are the deepest and most personal to me. I really do not like this time of the year because this is what we call the fighting season. And when we lose guys, it's typically, you know, late August, September, October, into November. And my calendar is just inundated. I lost 23 people that I would have given my life for, that I always thought were better men than me. And I mean, there were things that we did. Hollywood couldn't, in their best screenwriting, could not make up some of the things that were really life lessons if you're not only going to survive in a place like that, but work in a place like that. We went to, like, one of the very first tribal meetings we went to when I got to the team in 2005. We went up to an area also in Shawali Coat, and we knew it was full of bad guys. We went on the backside of this mountain, and I kid you not, indescribable. There had to be 400 people in black garb, black eyeliner, with weapons, and we stumbled upon a funeral that they were having for some Taliban guy that got killed. And, you know, we pulled up in our gun trucks, and or no, back then we didn't have gun trucks. We had like Hiluxes and pickup trucks. I just remember getting on the radio and I'm like, well, this is either going to go extremely well or it's going to go extremely bad. And of course, I have to give all the credit to my team because everywhere we went, we rehearsed and practiced in nauseum. So when you do something, people always relate it to CQB or direct action. When you do something 100 times in a day, well, maybe not in a day, maybe in 2, 3 days, but you do it over and over and over, you start figuring out what foot they're going to step off with, how they lean, whether they're quick on a one or slow on a one. And I just like threw the door open, put on my ball cap, and walked right out in the middle of them and did my Durka Durka Muhammad Jihad. I was like, hey, I don't want to kill nobody here, but somebody wants to sit down and have tea. Tell me what's going on. See how I can help you.
Were you in
Or if
city?
you want to get in a fight, let's ruck up.
Were you in?
And they were like,
and were you in Afghan garb? Were you in uniform or?
oh, we were in uniform and kit.
Full battle rattle.
Yeah. And we were just doing, at the time, we were doing a series of operations called Sweep, Clear, Hold, and Build. So we were sweeping the area for enemy concentrations and activity. We would clear it with combat operations, move in and secure it, try to hold it, reinforce governance, security, governance, and development, and then try to stabilize it to give legitimacy to the central government, which they didn't understand in their culture. So sometimes it was an opportunity to open a window, and that's what I would do. That was one of the ones. So ultimately, what happened is after I waited out there in the middle of all those people, the tribal elder's son came over, and I greeted him, all of respectful things in front of everybody else, and he walked over and he grabbed my hand. And for most people who don't know, like in their culture, when another man comes over and holds your hand, that's a social symbolic gesture that this man's my friend.
Yep.
And
different
what
way-
he was telling them all is that you cannot touch him. I'm going to talk to him and we're going to have a discussion. And he spoke for his father. And, a lot of them dudes, we would end up fighting or killing later, just because they
pick their side.
do what they do.
Yeah, that's just it. It's very different than Western culture. And I know when I was there, a lot of people had problem with that. But you're right, that level of closeness, they would, getting in personal. If I remember, we used to say that there's no concept of personal space in Afghanistan. They would be very close to you. They would get in our society here, we'd get very uncomfortable if someone got that close. That's just the way they were. And like say, grabbing your hand and holding your hand, walking through the fob or, through the village or whatever, it meant a lot. It almost was like a shield. It was like a cone of protection. Yeah. And you think that probably saved you or probably put you in a good light with a lot of those people not to even try to mess with you while you were there? Because it sounds like you immersed yourself right in the middle of it.
Oh yeah. I'm like I told you before, man, I'm a C- student, and I was a third string quarterback that showed up on a Super Bowl team of good guys, experienced guys. Seniors were seniors, juniors were juniors, very professional. They worked hard, they played hard. And I knew that when I told them I'm going out there, my team sergeant ended up being one of my best friends in the whole world. His name's Willie Loopers. He got killed November 15th. actually in a train accident at a charity event in Midland, Texas. It was a very tragic accident. Um, and the last thing he did was save his wife's life. He threw her off of the truck that they were on in the direction of the train, which threw her clear, and then he was killed. But he was the kind of guy that, like, we knew our roles. Like, having a prior service captain or officer, we would always laugh, and he would say, "You throw the big bullets, I throw the small ones." You know what I mean? Like, I call in a close air support, I'm calling in indirect, I'm sending up sit reps. Like, if I'm fighting for my truck, something's probably pretty bad. But he does the fire and maneuver. We always, in our TTP and SOP, I was in the first truck because I wanted to be able to send the first situation report, troops in contact, whatever it was. And I had sworn that I would never follow my troops in combat. And it worked out perfectly because I was just the needle, and those guys behind me were the anvil and the sickle.
Yeah.
So all I had to do was pin the enemy down or identify them or give them a good sit rep, and they were doing their thing. So by the time I waited out there in the middle of all those people to do my thing, when I came back to the trucks, there was only 2 trucks there, but they had dispersed all of those gun trucks and those civilian trucks and the Afghan. We didn't even have the A&A back then. It was the Afghan militia forces that we were fighting with. And they basically had probably a 500-meter long half moon of guns and people. And they knew, the Afghan, those people knew exactly what that meant. If I didn't come out of that group, it wasn't going to go well.
Right. And they got the hint. So let me just curious to go back to that young man, the guy's son who grabbed your hand. Was he someone you stayed in contact with? Was he someone that became an ally, or did he unfortunately become an enemy later?
No, unfortunately, we ultimately ended up having to. Another one of the more daring things that we did, we literally disguised a couple of vehicles, drove right to his house, and arrested him because we knew he was running an IED sale. And brought him back, put him in the PUC facility, interrogated him for a couple of days, and then basically we ended up letting him go and just told him, if we get the next inclination, you're a dead man. And I would say probably about a month later, some highly confirming intelligence came in that he was back doing what he did. And somebody put a J-pill target on him and killed him.
Yeah. He picked his side. The obviously with what you did, speaking the language and all that, I mean, besides just the enemy combatants on the battlefield, you like you said, you established friendships and relationships with some of the local leaders, and obviously with your interpreters probably. But anyone that stands out that you stayed in contact with after you're done doing tours, anyone that just you saw the hope of humanity in, that you saw, you said, this is, if they could all be like this would be a much better place. Someone that was in it for the right reason.
Yeah, the only one that I can honestly think of that was still alive after probably the 10-year mark, after I've been deploying to Afghanistan for 10 years, was probably my interpreter. And the other interpreters had been killed or captured and tortured and mutilated. And I managed to get my interpreter and his family out of Afghanistan. And it took 4.5 years of dealing with the paperwork and the nonsense and the embassies and the politicians. But yeah, he's one. Actually, there's two interpreters, but um,
Most of
yeah,
mine live.
they
In,
were
I don't know what years.
they
Most
were
of
they were like the definition of what we were there fighting for.
Yeah, yeah. Most of mine, I have one in New York, one out in Colorado, and I probably have 3 or 4 living in the D.C. Baltimore area. A lot of mine got out that weren't killed, and they're doing everything from teaching classes to working in schools to being Uber drivers. So they're kind of across the board. Now, we talked mostly about Afghanistan, but you have just as many of the other tours, up to the 17. Some of these same questions about those other places, and you don't have to say what places they are or whatever, but whatever you feel comfortable. But anything that stands out from any of those that maybe they weren't as kinetic, or maybe anything that happened there, or anything you saw that I always tell people in combat, we see the worst of humanity and we see the best of humanity. I've always said that, right? And there's always, you can't have good without bad, or vice versa. But anything from any of those that stands out that just was again, left an impact on you, somebody, an event, a person, anything like that from any of your other combat tours?
I mean, I think probably one of the things that very early on, one of the things that we did, one of the operations that we did was probably a true joint and combined operation against three groups of insurgents around Canada. So there was um, one insurgent commander who had a pretty large number of guys. And when I say pretty large, I mean, if you've got maybe 70 to 100 fighters, dudes carrying guns that do what you tell them to, that's a pretty large group. And we had two groups of something probably smaller, between 40 and 50. And one of the things that I love history, and I'm always I'm reading about how, how do small numbers defeat larger numbers. You start thinking about, Hannibal and the Romans or whatever. Like, what did they do? How did they reinvent the wheel, or just change their game to come out victorious? And I had a couple of guys, uh, we'll say their names are Gene and Jay, and they were great intel guys. And they came to me one day and they're like, we're going to have to really be careful about going and trying to operate up in these areas, because they're very fluid. These guys are very fluid. They're well supplied out of Pakistan, yada, yada, yada. And the IED threat hadn't really kicked off. So we were getting ambushed or doing the ambushes quite a bit when we could get good, solid intelligence. But what I wanted to do originally is I wanted to find a way. I mean, I got 10 SF guys and maybe 30 Afghans. And the Afghans hadn't been through basic training. They're getting what training we give them, which is better than most at that time. But I'm like, how do I mitigate this threat? Because we can't go through any valley or up any road in Afghanistan. The key terrain is the people, and the people that get on the key terrain in Afghanistan is just everything is above you. So we came up with a bunch of different options, and what we ended up doing was some small kinetic operations. So what we found out was, when the pay guy was coming from Pakistan to pay these three groups. So what we decided was, we would leave some information behind when we ambushed the people coming across with the money, and made it look like the largest of the insurgent commanders was the one that stole it. So 2 days later, we get this, intel report from people that are working for us, providing information, and it's like, hey, there's 200 and something Taliban up here fighting each other. And the two smaller insurgent commanders didn't like each other, but they disliked the other guy more. So when my intel guys found out, did their profiles, their site profiles on the three of them, it's like, hey, we get these guys to turn on each other, we can mitigate this entire force and never fire a bullet. And that's ultimately what we ended up doing. Was we ended up ambushing the patrol, the pay patrol that came across the border, left some information to make it look like the larger of the insurgent commanders was the one that stole it. And then the other two smaller guys attacked him. So the force of 150 plus or minus insurgents got whittled down to about 45 or 50 amongst the three groups. And that's, to me, that was like what you do as a Green Beret. Like, how do you mitigate the enemy without having to send over a bunch of American troops and spending a whole bunch more money? And I had such good commanders in my battalion and in my group that they're like, all I had to do was give them a 5-minute brief over an Iridium phone, and I could do it when I was on the way there. Like, I wasn't calling to have to ask for 10 different levels of permission. I would just call and submit a 5W, leave the wire, and hey, we're getting ready to hit a bomb maker, or we're getting ready to do this. I just want you to know. So when it spikes in the talk, you'll know it's us. Cut on the trackers, cut on the radio, boom, and you can operate. But that, I feel like that was one of my biggest personal victories as a tactical level commander, was to take these guys that I had been given the opportunity to serve with, that were so smart and so dedicated, that we came up with this crazy plan. And like, where else are you going to learn to do something like that?
Right. I mean, that's the epitome of, small unit warfare. It's about, I mean, you got a 13-man team or whatever, you got a small element, and you're going against a much larger, numbering force. You've got to use every combat multiplier, and obviously in things like that, right? We used close air support. We used, calling up to the sky and getting bomb runs, but this is using intel and just outsmarting them and getting them turning and dog eat dog, right? Have them feed off each other. And like you said, you didn't have to fire a bullet, and you wiped out about 2/3 of them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir, that's a fact.
Yeah, that's a lesson many could learn from after the fact, right? Because it's not. I know there's a lot of analogies and probably old things going back to Genghis Khan and everything, but it's not always about hitting them with direct energy right up front. Sometimes that brain's the strongest muscle we got. Use that. You don't have to work too hard. Even though a lot of us in the Army always work harder, not smarter, but that's definitely a case of working smarter.
If you think about the 10 primary principles or sayings from, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, I mean, it was applied by, a Chinese general against massive armies, but those principles, like, it doesn't have to be Clausewitz to be good principles of war. Attack the enemy where he isn't.
Right. Yeah.
Never attack a fortified city. My favorite one in all of the counterinsurgency classes I ever taught was, if you don't know yourself and you don't know your enemy, you'll never win a battle. If you know your enemy but you don't know yourself, or you know yourself but you don't know your enemy, you only win half your battles. But if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you'll win all your battles.
Yeah. Yeah. And that could be applied to a lot of things in life, not just combat.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, I was a hockey coach for many years, and I used many principles and lessons out of the military to teach young boys how to play hockey and be successful and that kind of stuff. Same thing. But and in life, right? In the corporate world, right? You compete and you do this and that, and you know your competitors, know your all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's something. And so we'll wrap up here. We got a few minutes left. When you look back over those tours and all that stuff, and you've written a great book. I've had the link up there, Lions of Kandahar. I love it. Have it on the coffee table still upstairs. It's one of my favorites. And you did a good old boy from Appalachia did a pretty good job of writing a book there. I got to tell you that. But I knew you're definitely made English class. But when you look back on accomplishments and things you're proud of, not just that, but even your own men, because you wrote a lot. I mean, your book was all about phenomenal men that you served with and stuff like that. Anything you can think of that's just one of your greatest. I mean, you look back with just fondness and just pride on anything that the men you led, the men you served with, and the things that you guys did that just really stick to you.
I don't know how much time you have. You might have to do another whole episode. So one of my junior Bravos ended up going to Delta. My junior Charlie, engineer, ended up becoming a warrant, and he's now one of the top 5 pilots in the 160th. He's rated on 6 different aircraft, 3 fixed wing and 3 rotary wing platforms.
Wow.
My junior medic, Delta, one we called Shaky Steve, he went to Harvard Medical School, married and got like 6 kids now. One of the top and finest doctors and surgeons in the U.S. Army. Like, if you want somebody operating on your child's eyes, that, like, when I look at the men that I served with, every single one of them, like being a Green Beret was just a stepping stone for them. It's just a piece of time. It was, when you're in the job, it's not what you do, it's who you are. And then when you get out, it's what you did, not who you are. And I thank God every day that I was given the opportunity to serve on and with guys that did more than I could have ever hoped for them to do. And I think that and my biggest takeaway from home was that my wife ended up being everything that I ever prayed for. And the only reason I think that I'm here, that I'm still married, and that we've been as successful as we've been was because I didn't realize at the time, and I made a lot of mistakes. More mistakes than should be ever forgiven for. But being an Army, for anybody who's listening, Army wives may not wear a uniform, but by God, they serve.
Yep.
And sometimes their service is harder than ours, because I know where I'm at and I know what I'm doing. But when I'm dating myself, but when the beeper goes off or the cell phone goes off, and you give them a kiss and you go downstairs and you grab your bag and you leave, sometimes you can't tell them where you're going or what you're doing. And to me, that's a real hero, is they're going to be there when you come back. So my teammates and my family made every sacrifice worth it.
Yep.
I got to walk as a giant, man.
Yeah, and you
We all
probably
did.
you stood as a giant over there, but no, it's got to be rewarding. I mean, to see these guys on your team who you were with them and teaching them and mentoring them and providing leadership young in their lives and careers to see them move on to do other things like this. Like you said, it was a stepping stone, but one that was instrumental in giving them a solid foundation to go on and accomplish phenomenal things, and that kind of stuff. And it's awesome to be able, it's like when if employees, right? So you grow them, they get promoted, they get to take a new responsibility, they get a leadership position. And you're like, wow, at least I got to, hopefully something I put on them, something I trained them on or whatever, it contributed to that. And me personally, I look at that as a success. I look at that. That's awesome that they're now doing this. And I know it's got to feel the same way for you of like, yeah, you may not have taught them all the medical stuff, but you definitely were there instrumental in giving them those core skills to build and be a success, right? Because that's what I do a lot in my company, trying to hire veterans and that kind of stuff. Because when I work with recruiters, it's like this guy can know that's technology or not, but he brings so many, or she brings so many soft skills and other skills to the table that no one here has. That's a civilian, and they operate, and people know who former military folks are. They can tell the difference.
Well, I mean, there's so much communication in small units that, first of all, when you go, like, I couldn't wait to get up and go to work every day because you never knew what it was going to be like. And I knew when I stepped in that team room, it was on, whether it was shit talking or shooting or training or planning or whatever it was, somebody in there is going to test you to make you better. And they're not going to settle for, like my medics. How many people do you know trained? Like, we would go to the range to do night shoots, and they would break out a box of IVs, and we would have to give each other IVs under knots.
Right.
That's something you had to do in the Ranger Regiment a long time ago. I don't know if they still do it, but like, that was something they plugged in on their own because they knew it was important, because all of our work's done at night.
Right. Yeah. No one asked them to.
Stuff like that. I mean, and I would see them do that stuff, man, and I was like,
yeah, they took the initiative knowing it needed to be done, even though no one told them to or directed them to. They just knew what it took to make the team that much better prepared. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, Rusty, thank you so much, man. We did another hour. I appreciate you coming back on back-to-back 2 weeks in a row. And for a guy who told me beforehand when I first started, I got nothing to talk about. I haven't done anything. It's not much. I'm like, oh man, I know. I've read the book. I know better than that. But I mean, it was amazing. Thank you so much for giving me your second. I know a lot of people were looking forward to it. I got a lot of comments after last week. People were sending me texts with quotes that you said and that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm glad we were able to make this happen again. And especially when you're a busy cat right now, as you've been moving and doing a whole bunch of other stuff. But thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's good to see you again, brother, and giving us your time and your night.
I'm with you, man. Thank you so much.
Yep.
I appreciate it. I love talking about my guys, man. I'm very proud of them.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I feel you, and I totally get it. When I get back down your way, which I'm down there quite a bit, I will definitely I'll hit you up, and if we find ourselves there together at the same time, I'd love to swing by and give you a. I'll hold your hand and I'll hold your neck. That's for sure.
Come on.
All right, buddy. Well, hey, you have a good night. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure you tune in on Tuesdays for Lima Charlie, Thursday nights for our regular show. Check out all of our sponsors. They've been scrolling at the bottom. Make sure you check out Rusty's book, Lions of Kandahar. Prime Big Day deals are going on right now. Maybe you can get a deal on it. If you can, it doesn't matter. It's worth every penny to just really understand what our special forces did in Afghanistan and what sacrifice and real patriotism is all about. So with that, thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and I'll give everyone a good night.
Take care, amigo.